All right. The nothing ever happens people, they enjoy a shaky, briefly uncertain victory on this one, it seems.
South Korean President Yoon Suk Yeol is backing down, saying that he's going to lift his martial law order.
South Korea's president, a conservative who ran on, among other things, the abolition of the Ministry of Gender Equality. Yeah, he's that kind of guy, our incel king. Very unpopular, currently plagued by scandal, though to my mind, the scandal's pretty minimal. His wife accepted like a $2,000 purse, but the limit on gifts is $750. It's led to months and months of protests against him, in large part because people are unhappy with the general state of the country. See what's going on with regard to gender politics in South Korea. See what's going on with regard to the doctors' strike, with them refusing to practice because they're unhappy with the idea of more people being admitted in through the medical school process because it would depress their wages. It's just, South Korea is not in a good place. It's just not. People don't like the president. So after the most recent parliamentary election, where the opposition Liberal Democrat Party won in a landslide, presumably this guy's feeling the heat, our beloved South Korean president, beloved, not beloved, thank you, declared martial law in the middle of the night, just randomly. Me when I declare martial law because I'm bored. The martial law had a provision within it that specifically stated that it would suspend all activities from Parliament. The military surrounded the Parliament building to prevent people from getting in, but 190 members of Parliament managed to make it in anyway, and they all voted unanimously to end the martial law. Now, technically, they have the constitutional right to do this, but also technically, the provision of the martial law stated that Parliament was suspended. So who wins? Well, in this case, whoever has the public support wins, and the president had the public support of no one. Apparently, not even the military knew this was going to happen. The president has connections with the top brass of the military. Of course he does. He's the president. But even the general rank and file of the military. Look, this is the thing. Honestly, the South Korean president should have learned from the MAGA movement, which is that if you are going to undermine a country's democracy, you can't just up and J6, even January 6 was predicated by months and months and months of disinformation pushed through a variety of media channels on how the election was being stolen. In this case, he literally just woke up, said the government has been infiltrated by North Koreans or North Korean sympathizers or whatever, and then declared martial law. You need to lay the pretext so that the public will support you. He failed to do it, so there was no public support. Yeah, you need to meal prep your dictatorship. Exactly. Does he have the support of South Korean mainstream media like Republicans do? Nope. So again, everyone who's watching this from America, take note, okay? This is why Republicans have been doing what they have been doing for the past 4 or 5 years, This is why you lay the groundwork. This is why you build public support. This is why you oust people who aren't loyalists from your party. This is why you ruthlessly cull, dissent within your own ranks. This is why you buy out the media and you make sure they're all publishing and, peddling your message. Because on its own, a seizure of power, martial law, doesn't mean very much in a modern democratic society. It doesn't tend to go anywhere. Society's just too complicated. You need the public support. I promise you, when Trump takes office, he won't even have to do this to attain the same level of power.
That declaration led to huge swarms of protesters hitting the streets of Seoul, demanding that he lift the order, many demanding the president's resignation. Let's go live to the scene in South Korea's capital with CNN's Mike Valerio. Mike, what are you seeing?
Well, we're seeing people in shock and dismay occupying this block, which is right in front of the National Assembly. One of the scenes where this drama played out, where, as you mentioned, all the members of the National Assembly, or many of the members of the National Assembly, come back and unanimously vote to overturn and suspend martial law instituted here in South Korea. So let's push in, show you.
So after the parliament came in and voted the martial law over, initially, the South Korean military said that they would not respect the parliamentary ruling and would only listen to the president. Then the president came out and said, okay, never mind, guys. Sorry, please don't hurt me. I'm canceling the martial law. I'm canceling the coup. Don't worry about it. So the lesson we learned from this, I suppose, is that you can't just tell a dictator no. The real measure of their ability to undermine a democracy is whether or not the military supports them, and the military support for him will be contingent upon like a number of other factors. There is a very real possibility this could have gone the other way, which is that Parliament votes an end to martial law, and the military is like, oh, you're all arrested. You're all going into the hole. Opposition leader, you're going in the hole. Conservative Party leader, you're going in the hole. All of you, you're going in the damn hole. That might have happened. It didn't this time because he didn't lay the groundwork.
Some of these protesters, there were hundreds of people before. You know, when we were on Boris and Brianna earlier in the evening, I would say about 3 hours ago, we saw 2 military vehicles that were trying to get out of here. One of the pieces of good news that we've been able to report since we were on the air, we saw troops, members of the military who were positioned.
Oh, another big lesson from this, another very important lesson. Because this all happened out of the blue, the members of parliament, the media, the people in general, they did not preemptively kowtow to the demands of the authoritarian. They did not obey in advance. Our media has already obeyed in advance. Anyone catch how the New York Times put out like 57 pieces about Joe Biden pardoning Hunter Biden, and then like buried underneath all of that was the like one article on Patel, the future FBI director, having a literal hit list where he's just flatly said like, I'm going to prosecute political opponents in an act of revenge and I don't care. They've already kissed the ring. Like Joe Scarborough, you know? People over here in the West, they've already shown fear. They've already shown they're going to obey.
Up and down this street, again, one of the main streets of Seoul, one of the main avenues looking to the beautiful National Assembly, all of those military assets seem to have dispersed after that unanimous decision from the parliament and after we heard from South Korea's president that, yep, he was going to back down. Now, what we're waiting for, the cabinet has to come in of the presidential administration and simply give the rubber stamp and say, okay, this is all over. But it seems to be, you know, a palpable sigh of relief. People still honestly befuddled, Boris and Brianna, of how this happened. We have the South Korean president giving a speech over live TV, unannounced, saying that from his point of view, pro-North Korean and anti-state forces were working to overturn the government and infiltrate the state. And we're all kind of wondering, what is he talking about? Very unclear, no specific pieces of evidence, and people who you talk to are wondering similar things. How did the president even decide this? How did he take us down this path? It's such a sensitive, of course.
Really reveals like what a relative masterclass the Republicans have been giving us in how to do this, right? Months and months and years of coordinated, like billions of dollars of media coverage on the election being stolen, on immigrants destroying our country, on this and that and the other. Like here you have a wannabe dictator just flatly like, oh yeah, this is all happening. But imagine if instead he had spent his entire presidency like backing and working with and kowtow, like, you know, like building a media apparatus that relentlessly pushed the narrative of like North Korean infiltrators. Imagine if he pulled a McCarthyism, but like as the president rather than as a senator, you know, with all the power he had, but he didn't.
Of course, tributary of South Korean history, wrapping up here, because this is the first time since 1980 that martial law was instituted right after the Korean War. This is a place where dictators ruled, essentially. We have 28,500 American troops who are spread throughout the country, a crucial American ally. Stability here is key, so we seem to be breathing a sigh of relief, but need to hear from the president about why he did this and what is next, Boris and Brianna.
Yeah, and Mike, what about his future? He's so unpopular, as you have noted in your reports. Can he survive this politically?
You know, so many rules of politics have been rewritten over the past couple of years. It seems unlikely that he will be able to survive, but his critics would say that he does thrive on drama and taking a tough stand, especially against North Korea, and being a fighter. So who knows? Unable to answer that question before the sun rises. If he will resign, so many people want him to. Will he survive? It seems unlikely, but we're buckling up here in East Asia. It remains to be seen.
Mike Valerio with the latest from Seoul. Thank you so much for that update. Let's bring in CNN political and national security analyst David Sanger. David, thank you so much for being with us. One of the outstanding questions here is why South Korea's president would have taken this step of declaring martial law if he had all suspected that his National Assembly, including the members of his own party, even the leader of his own party, would vote unanimously to overturn that declaration. What was he trying to accomplish?
You know, it's a real mystery, because it does seem as if he has made one of the great political errors you possibly could. Now, I covered South Korea back in the days when martial law was coming to an end in the 1980s. And the population does not want to go back to that age when even the first presidents who were elected were former generals. And so the transition to a true democracy and to becoming the world's 12th largest economy, which is South Korea's position today, is something that South Koreans of both parties cherish. And so how he thought he was going to get away with this is a mystery to me, especially because as
this is not true. South Korea is not very democratic. There are plenty of examples, even before this, of the backsliding into authoritarianism. The idea that democracy is like universally valued there is not true. This was just a very hasty and poorly organized declaration of martial law. Like, you know, this is not a good example of how it's done. Again, over here in America, we're seeing a real masterclass. We're seeing it being done basically about as well as it can be. You know, how do you take America, a country that is so strong, I mean, so wealthy, so powerful, how do you break something like that? I mean, relatively speaking, South Korea is a backwater compared to America, and South Korea ain't even a backwater. It's just America is so powerful with so many connections. There are so many incentive structures you have to keep in mind. You have to build a very, very powerful media backing. You know, you have to manufacture consent very aggressively, and they have.
As one U.S. official noted to me, in his initial statement 5 or 6 hours ago, there was no mention of North Korea, of a threat to the sanctity of the state of South Korea. This was all about a way to resolve political gridlock.
Yeah, I mean, to that point, how is the U.S. viewing this, David? Because a stable and democratic South Korea is so important to America when it comes to commerce, when it comes to its alliances and its power in the Asia-Pacific region. How are U.S. officials reacting?
Well, first, they were shocked, Brianna, because they had gotten no advance notice of this, which is, you know, violation of rule number 1 with your major allies. Second, they viewed it initially as a huge embarrassment to President Biden, who in March of 2023 invited South Korea to be one of the co-sponsors of one of the White House democracy summits. And the agenda called for countering authoritarianism. So martial law doesn't exactly fit into that. You may recall that the Biden administration, to its credit, brought South Korea and Japan together to help counter China and, of course, North Korea, and considered that one of its major accomplishments in the Indo-Pacific. And that was an initiative that ran through.
Admitting South Korea as a U.S. client state? I mean, not to state the obvious, but.
With President Yoon. But they were clearly worried about him just because of the question of his political unpopularity. They were shocked today. I had text messages from administration officials who said their public statements were going to be pretty mild so that they could leave the president room to back down. President Yoon room to back down, and that's exactly what he did. And, you know, we'd all love to hear what those private messages to him were.
I feel like the leader of the opposition becoming or attempting to become a dictator would actually give you a pretty solid pretext for being very aggressive publicly. Again, like, pardon my love of, you know, democracy and all that, but I'd like to believe that advocates for democracy as they did back during the origins of democracy, you know, in the 18th century, would actually be very like fiery. And I remember what the French Revolution looked like. Those motherfuckers were pretty loud. I don't know.
David, I'm curious about the veracity of his claims, his justification.
Remember when we used to believe things? No.
For installing martial law. One of them being that pro-North Korean operatives had infiltrated the state apparatus. Now, we've seen North Korea conduct some international operations before. I think that the Sony hack is one example.
Why are we giving this obvious lie any air? Seriously? He made this claim, no evidence, then backed off the martial law 3 hours later. That's like, why are we even pretending this is a thing?
Kim Jong-un going after family members abroad, murdering family members abroad. But is that a legitimate concern for the South Korean government?
Please say no.
Well, as I mentioned before, the statement said nothing about the stability of the South Korean state. So are there North Korean operatives or sympathizers in South Korea? Yes, of course. Have there been since the war ended in 1953?
Okay, hold on.
Yes,
hold on.
Of course there have been.
This is obviously true.
And so what he didn't do was make the connection about whether or not those influences were actually a true threat to South Korea.
Okay, no, never mind.
And you know, the only threat to South Korea from the North that I can see is a nuclear one, right? The North now has 60 or more nuclear weapons.
He's politely saying no. Yeah, but what he should be saying is like, no, it's an obvious, desperate, unsubstantiated lie by an authoritarian in a bid to seize power. Not this like moderate, well, he should have done more to clarify the exact nature of the threat that he made up was.
A conventional attack across the DMZ would be hard for North Korea. So this seemed more like pretense in order to get the upper hand in what I described before as political gridlock than any real threat to the South Korean state. And in fact, I can recall many other moments when I think South Korea's nascent democracy was more threatened in the late 80s and early 90s than it is today.
Yeah, okay.
But let's begin with that standoff in South Korea, which began with the late-night announcement from President Yoon.
친애하는 국민 여러분.
I hereby declare an emergency martial law in order to defend the Free Republic of Korea from the threat of North Korean communist forces.
Many other Fox News-like channels exist, at least here in Europe. There is no equivalent in the Western world to the extent to which American institutional and independent media have been captured by capital. The closest other countries have are like offshoots of Fox News. Like Murdoch, of course, has like Sky News, you know, has operations in the UK. But if we're talking, like, it goes so far beyond that in America, where it's across the board, like talk radio completely seized, local media all owned by like one company. Fox News, far and away the most watched legacy news media channel. Independent media completely bought out. All of these previously independent channels or podcasts or whatever, they've all fallen in with the right wing. Like, the closest you have to liberal messaging that reaches the mainstream is Hollywood. And Hollywood ain't that liberal, man. It just isn't. We're already getting examples of like celebrities who criticize Trump being made to walk back their statements, you know?
And to eradicate the shameless pro-North, anti-state forces that are depriving our people of their freedom and happiness. This measure is necessary to safeguard our constitutional order of freedom.
It would appear the US was not given any advance notice of President Yoon's statement. Within minutes of it appearing, the army had announced the suspension of all parliamentary activity. Protests, they said, are banned under threat of arrest.
Where does the New York Times fit into this? Bought. But I mean, they were bought a century ago. The New York Times has always been a mouthpiece for America as like an agent of capital and as a global hegemon. The New York Times has always done that. They have always been that. They have never been like a credible organization.
and the media was censored according to martial law. But that had not stopped thousands of protesters coming out onto the streets, nor did it stop the opposition lawmakers from fighting their way into the National Assembly, past soldiers and police who tried in vain to prevent any access. An army helicopter landed on the roof of the Parliament building. Soldiers were patrolling inside, but they failed to prevent a vote taking place. And within 2 hours of President Yoon's decision, 190 of the 300 MPs had voted to overturn it. Under South Korean law, their vote takes precedence. Let's speak then to BBC producer Jake.
Well, because the president backed off, like he could have just ignored the vote. I'm telling you, liberals are going to take the wrong message from this, and they're going to think like, you know, norms prevail no matter what.
Who's been in Seoul following events through the night, a fast-moving situation, and in the last half hour, the order rescinded by President Yoon.
That's right. President Yoon has given another televised speech to the public saying that as soon as he has the quorum and can get his cabinet members together, he will lift the martial law, and he's already pulled back the troops from the National Assembly. Now, the question is, what next? The National Assemblymen and women are still in the building right behind me at the National Assembly because they don't know if President Yoon will truly back off this easily. I think there's still this sense of this disbelief that Yoon would play such a high-stake game and then back off so easily.
Jake, is there any sense you get, it's been half an hour since the statement, that the army is retreating to barracks?
I mean, we've seen videos of army leaving the National Assembly. We heard from the National Assembly members inside saying that they saw the military and the police leave the main chamber where the vote took place. And, you know, we have the word from President Yoon. I think they're staying put because they're seeing a small chance that Yoon would do some kind of other subterfuge. I think the protesters are here and they're not going away anytime soon. You can hear the kind of blaring speeches given by angry protesters. And then there you can also hear the singing because they want to stay here until truly all the military, all the police had gone home.
Jay, where do you think this leaves politics in Seoul tonight, and particularly the position of the president?
Now, the president has been keeping mum about what next. I mean, he just did his televised speech, and that was it. In terms of what the main opposition party will do, I think there is a bit of a consensus among the opposition party members that Yoon must now either step down or be impeached. I think the two lawmakers inside the National Assembly I spoke to said that this is a pretty universal feeling amongst the Democratic Party, who has nearly enough seats. They just need a few more defection from the ruling party to get this motion. I think there's a sense across the board that Yoon had crossed over some kind of line.
Damn, this is like the third Coup watch party stream this year. Fourth, if you count November 5th.
And we will see what happens next, but things could move very quickly in the next week.
And presumably, given the result of the April elections, the support of the people will be with the lawmakers and not with the president.
This president has been very, very unpopular. His approval rating has gone down below 20% in recent weeks. And a lot of people, both on the right and the left, has been quite dismissive of the president.
Yeah, the position of president is almost like electing a king, isn't it? It's, guys, this has nothing to do with the presidency or the system of government, okay? The real system of governance that we live under is capitalism. In a system where wealth can buy you political power, that is the ultimate determining factor. You can have a Congress or a parliament, you can have a unicameral or bicameral legislature. There are a bunch of different ways you can organize your democracy, and there might be marginal benefits to one or the other, but there is one similarity in all democracies across the world. It's the same feature, and it's having the same effect everywhere.
President Yoon, and this is partly why President Yoon possibly have been pushed to this kind of desperate move.
Can you just take us back to the moment in the night when he made this announcement?
Turns out everyone wants money. It's not about people being greedy. It's about the allocation of wealth and power under the system. Don't default to namby-pamby institutional arguments about what type of government we should have, or whether or not people are greedy, or the soul of humanity has lost its way, or whether or not Christ warned about this. There's a guy, it's a guy called Karl Marx, and he had something to say about this. This is where the socialist argument needs to be at its most disciplined, okay? Behind all of these coup attempts and behind what is happening right now in America, you will find the same actors at play. Over and over and over again. Historical materialism gives us the answers we need. Not in like a culty, oh, this is the truth or whatever. Like, you can just do the work yourself. You can just look at it. Okay, where is all this coming from? Well, over here in America, we can see a pretty direct line between the ultra-wealthy backing the Republicans, them buying up all the media outlets, and then paying, broadcasters to push the same lines in messaging. There's a pretty direct tie between the money that's fielded and what the message ends up being. And the message determines where the votes go, and the votes then, of course, decide who gets to be president. But you have to see where it comes from. Yeah, exactly. Democracy has to be guarded. You can't just assume the institutions will hold when you give hundreds of billions of dollars to like 5 people.
Because it's worth just considering the perpetual threat that South Korea is under from its near-nuclear armed neighbor. When a president comes on national television and makes an address that martial law is in place, what is the first instant reaction of people in South Korea?
But ultimately, it's still the public that sucks, like George Carlin said. No, this is a reactionary sentiment. The public is the people are forever, okay? This is like the lazy, oh, well, people suck attitude that ensures nothing gets done. There is a direct, systematic flaw in how we conduct our democracies, which is that it is possible for very, very, very small groups of people with very different interests from the rest of us to gain more power than everyone else combined. That has nothing to do with the public. Why does the public suck? Because the public are going online and watching YouTube videos made by influencers who have direct financial ties to the Republican Party, because they go and turn on the TV and watch news broadcasts given to them by anchors who have direct financial ties to the Republican Party. Like, you can... The people are being lied to. We're part of the public, and so are you, It's just a matter of happenstance. Maybe you got into left YouTube or whatever, but if you were born in a different place in a different time, you might have grown up watching exclusively Joe Rogan, and you might have cheered when Donald Trump won on November 5th. It's not like a feature of your brain chemistry. It's not an innate force or whatever.
I think there were people who are watching this announcement who are confused that maybe some kind of invasion, some kind of attack or provocation from North Korea may have happened, considering the wording of President Yoon. But quickly, I think there's a sense that North Korea is not their primary occupation. I mean, of course, we in the West see...
Just remember that the Hobbesian argument that people are naturally greedy and selfish is the bedrock of fascist thinking. Because fascists always approach dynamics like this from the assumption that we're fighting in a zero-sum game battle for the world. That people are naturally weak and evil and need to be broken in by the state to be useful. That's bullshit. I don't buy that at all. Humans got to where we got to because of cooperation. That's what gave us the world. It wasn't competition. It was our group dynamic. You take a regular human out of their day-to-day and you throw them in the wilderness. I don't know about you. My ass is getting eaten by a crocodile. I'm not stronger than your average orangutan, probably.
Korean Peninsula primarily through the eyes of geopolitics, but South Koreans, their main headline for the last few weeks has been about domestic politics. So when Yoon brought up North Korean threat to enact this martial law, I think a lot of Korean people were flabbergasted or simply did not know what to make of it. And even in his last speech saying that he will soon lift the martial law, he still repeated this claim that there's this force against him and against South Korea. So I think there's this sense that there's a bit of a division, a divorced kind of reality between how Yoon sees the situation and how the public here sees the situation.
Jake, good to get your thoughts. Thank you very much for that reaction on the ground in Seoul. Let's go then to Washington, speak to State Department correspondent Tom Bateman. Flabbergasted in South Korea. Were they flabbergasted in the halls of the State Department, Tom?
They were. I mean, first thing this morning when this was breaking, the sense you got from US officials as I came into this building was just one of complete shock. They were caught totally off guard by this. No one had been expecting it. We've heard them say on the record today that they had no advance warning of it. And this is coming from the lead.
Casual, checkered, what looks like a work shirt with no tie under worsted wool black jacket. Shit fit, as always, to be expected from somebody who presided over the genocide of the Palestinians. Next question.
Leader of an absolutely key US ally, absolutely core to the strategic posture of the US in that region.
Wait, did they say he was a State Department correspondent or a guy from the State Department? I was looking at chat when he said that. If he's just a correspondent, he didn't preside over the genocide of the Palestinians. I'm sorry for saying that.
And so for something like this to have taken place,
well, the fit's still bad.
No advance knowledge, at least that's what the US says, it's pretty extraordinary. And I think they spent, the hours of this morning working out exactly what was going on in Seoul, trying to talk to them.
Whoa.
In fact, it's not even clear at what level they managed to sort of get through to the South Korean government here. The wording that they've been using is that they were seeking to talk to him. It's not entirely clear to me that Secretary of State Anthony Blinken was able to speak to his counterparts.
If you want a stronger affirmation of the historical materialist element, I would encourage you, and you can look up any of them. I don't care, roll the dice. Look up any US-backed fascist government during the Cold War and what their relationship was like with both American and local business. Just look it up, any of them. It doesn't matter. There are dozens of examples. You can go anywhere. You can go into Southeast Asia, you can go into the Middle East, you can go into Latin America or Central, you can go anywhere. You can go into Europe, go into Greece, go into Italy, it doesn't matter. Look up any of them. The capital class always runs the same direction. It's not because people who are wealthy are innately evil. That's not how it is. It's because there are material influences on our thinking. People don't like to think of themselves as evil, but people also like to act in their own self-interest. Their class interest. You can think of yourself as a good person, even as you do bad things, because you buy into an ideology that legitimizes your behavior. For example, a very common one from neoconservatives and neoliberals is the idea that by cutting welfare, you're actually helping working class people, because if welfare is too prominent, they become dependent on the state, which makes them less independent, less self-reliant, and also weakens the state because we have to spend more of our taxpayer dollars in welfare. And as the state weakens, it furthers towards collapse, which will then eventually hurt the people on welfare. The argument from a lot of these austerity hawks is that defunding welfare helps a lot of these people. Now, a lot of them know they're lying, and it is empirically provable that they are lying, by the way. But a lot of people who support that ideology believe it. They really honestly do. And that's because the wealthy people who know they're lying pushed propaganda to convince them of the legitimacy of that ideology. All of this circles back to material interests on the part of the capital class. But for a lot of people involved, they don't really understand their role in it. They don't understand to what extent their ideology is shaped by those forces.